The planet Zephyria was unlike any other in its corner of the galaxy. Its skies shimmered with soft greenish light, and its oceans glowed faintly at night, reflecting the twin moons above. Trees stretched high into the sky, their branches curving, gracefully as if in perpetual dance. Rivers wound through emerald valleys, and mountains rose like silent guardians. On this planet lived the Luminars, a gentle and intelligent alien species. Their skin shone faintly in soft pastel colors, and their eyes seemed to carry a quiet wisdom. They had built cities that floated above the land, made of crystal-like materials that reflected sunlight in beautiful patterns. Life, for the Luminars, was peaceful, full of music, learning, and art. They valued knowledge above all, and their greatest pleasure was exploring the mysteries of their own planet and the stars beyond. For many years, Zephyria had been untouched by danger. The Luminars' civilization grew steadily, their people healthy and thriving. But one day, a strange illness appeared. At first, it seemed minor, just a slight weakness in some citizens, an unusual fever or a faint glow in their eyes that dimmed, unexpectedly. The Luminars were cautious but not alarmed. They believed in the wisdom of observation and thought it might pass. Yet over time, the illness spread. It moved quickly from city to city, touching every corner of the planet. No Luminar seemed immune. Those who were sick grew weaker each day, and even the simplest tasks became impossible. The healers tried their remedies, combining the planet's natural resources with their advanced technology, but nothing worked. The illness seemed to resist every attempt at cure, growing stronger with each passing day. The Council of Elders, the governing body of Zephyria, grew increasingly worried. These were the wisest of the Luminars, known for making decisions that preserved the peace and prosperity of their civilization. Now even they found themselves unsure of what to do. They gathered in the Grand Hall of Light, a structure that hung above the largest city like a radiant jewel. The hall was filled with soft humming sounds, generated by energy crystals that helped them focus their minds. The elders discussed every possible option. They debated using experimental medicines, isolating entire cities, or even attempting to change the planet's climate in ways that might slow the illness. But nothing seemed certain. Every solution had risks, and time was slipping away. It was during one of these tense discussions that Elder Liara suggested a bold and frightening idea. She proposed sending a message into the galaxy, asking for help from any advanced beings, who might be willing and able to intervene. The room fell silent. The Luminars had long believed in diplomacy and had occasionally reached out to neighboring star systems, but sending a plea into the vast unknown was dangerous. There was no way to know who might respond. There could be kind beings, but there could also be creatures who would take advantage of their desperation. Still, the Council knew they had no choice. Their people were dying, and waiting passively was not an option. A team of skilled communicators and engineers began the work immediately. They designed a message that could travel across the galaxy, using light signals, sound waves, and even energy pulses that could carry meaning without words. The message explained the situation carefully, describing the illness, its effects on their people, and their urgent need for help. They made sure it conveyed respect, intelligence, and a sincere plea, hoping that whoever received it would understand their plight. Once it was ready, they launched it into the darkness of space, watching as it disappeared into the stars. The days that followed were filled with anxious waiting. The Luminars scanned the skies constantly, monitoring for any signs of response. They watched for changes in the light patterns of distant systems, for signals that might indicate someone had seen their message. Children asked questions, and parents tried to reassure them, though worry was visible in every home. Citizens of Zephyria went about their daily routines, but the fear of the unknown hung over everything. Some refused to leave their homes at night, afraid that the illness would strike them if they ventured out. Others worked tirelessly in the healing centers, helping those who were already sick, determined not to lose hope. Weeks passed, and still, there was no answer. The Luminars began to feel the weight of despair. Some whispered that no one would come, that they were alone in the galaxy, that their civilization might end without anyone knowing. Others held tighter to hope, believing that someone, somewhere, would see their plea. Among the council, the tension was almost unbearable. Every day they checked the skies, every night they debated new strategies, and every moment they feared the loss of another citizen. The illness continued its relentless spread, and the planet's cities, once vibrant with life and music, grew quieter, subdued by the shadow of sickness. Yet despite the fear and despair, the Luminars did not give up. Even as families mourned, lost loved ones, scientists worked tirelessly to understand the illness, mapping its patterns and searching for any hidden clues. Communities came together, sharing resources, knowledge, and comfort. They lit thousands of floating lanterns that drifted into the night sky, a symbol of hope and unity, even as uncertainty stretched across Zephyria. One evening, as twin moons rose high and cast silvery light over the cities, Elder Liara stood on the highest terrace of the Grand Hall. She looked out over the planet, watching the rivers glow faintly, the forests sway in the soft breeze, and the citizens tending to one another. She whispered a silent prayer to the stars, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear their plea. The light of the lanterns reflected in her eyes as she wondered who might come to their aid. She did not know that far beyond the galaxy, something was moving, something powerful, something that would change their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. For the first time in generations, the Luminars felt both fear and hope intertwined. They had reached out into the unknown, and now all they could do was wait. Every heartbeat, every breath, every small act of kindness became more precious because of the uncertainty that surrounded them. They did not know who would answer, or if anyone would come at all. Yet deep in their hearts, they clung to a single truth. Even in the darkest moments, hope could shine brighter than fear, and the possibility of salvation, no matter how distant, was worth waiting for. Time passed slowly on Zephyria. The days stretched long, each one filled with quiet anxiety. The Luminars continued their work, trying to understand the illness and keep their people safe. The healers moved tirelessly through the cities, carrying medicines and monitoring the sick. Children stayed close to their families, playing quietly, their laughter softer than before, because everyone sensed the heavy weight of waiting. Even the normally bright and lively floating markets seemed subdued, as the citizens worried about what the future might hold. The Luminar scientists had scanned every corner of the planet, and then beyond it. Their instruments could detect small changes in distant star systems, shifts in light patterns, and signals traveling across space. They studied the stars, hoping that someone, anyone, would answer their desperate message. The Council of Elders gathered frequently, discussing any tiny anomaly, any faint signal that might hint at hope. Sometimes they believed they saw something in the distance, a faint glow, a tiny flicker, but each time it faded before they could be sure. Their hearts rose with hope and fell with disappointment, over and over. Life on Zephyria became a strange mixture of fear and perseverance. People worked hard to care for the sick while trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Teachers continued to teach children in small groups, using holographic lessons and songs, trying to bring a little brightness to their lives. Artists painted murals in the streets to remind everyone of the beauty of the world outside their worries. Musicians played soft melodies in the healing centers to comfort the sick. In every corner of Zephyria, there was effort to keep hope alive, even as the shadow of the illness lingered. Then, one evening, as the twin moons rose and bathed the planet in silvery light, something unusual appeared on the far horizon. It was faint at first, barely visible, like a spark in the darkness. The council immediately focused all their scanning instruments toward it. The glow grew slowly, spreading across the distance, and the Luminars realized it was not a star or a natural phenomenon. It was moving. Something was approaching their planet. The news spread quickly. Citizens gathered on terraces and rooftops, pointing to the sky, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. "Who could it be?" they whispered to one another. Some hoped it was a kind civilization coming to help them. Others feared a new danger, one they could not yet imagine. The Council of Elders instructed everyone to remain calm, but even they felt a strange tension in the air. The approaching object was unlike any known spaceship they had ever seen. Its shape was jagged and metallic, almost alive in appearance, moving with a steady, determined grace. As the object drew closer, the Luminars began to notice more. It was not a single ship, but a fleet. Ships of different sizes moved together, perfectly synchronized, forming patterns across the sky. Their surfaces shimmered with colors that did not belong to Zephyria or its sun. Some looked like massive shards of crystal, others like twisting vines of metal. The fleet's presence was enormous, and even from a great distance, it cast a shadow over the cities below. The citizens of Zephyria were both fascinated and terrified. Many had never seen anything so large, so strange, so powerful. Parents held their children close, whispering reassurances they did not fully feel. The healers paused in their work to look up at the sky. Scientists and scholars rushed to the observation towers to gather data. The council called an emergency meeting, aware that the approaching fleet might be their salvation or their doom. Over the next hours, the fleet continued to move closer, entering Zephyria's atmosphere with a quiet but overwhelming presence. The ships did not fire weapons or make threatening gestures. They seemed to study the planet carefully, scanning cities, forests, rivers, and mountains. Some citizens noticed that the ships emitted a low hum, a sound that vibrated in the air and through the ground. It was not violent, but it was powerful, as if the fleet itself was alive and aware. The Luminars tried to interpret the movement, trying to understand whether this was a friendly approach or a warning of danger. Speculation ran wild. In homes, people whispered their fears. "Could they be friends?" some asked. "Or are they here to take something from us?" Others worried. Children looked up at the sky, eyes wide, imagining incredible stories of heroes and monsters. Even the elders, wise and experienced as they were, admitted privately that they did not know what to expect. Every scan, every calculation, only confirmed that these beings were far beyond anything Zephyria had encountered before. Despite the fear, the Luminars could not deny a flicker of hope. The fleet's arrival meant that someone, somewhere in the galaxy, had received their message. Perhaps these beings had the knowledge or technology to save them from the illness. Perhaps, just perhaps, their people would live. The council instructed the citizens to observe carefully but avoid any actions that might be misinterpreted as hostile. Every step was taken with caution, knowing that the first impression could determine the outcome of this unprecedented encounter. As the hours passed, the fleet began to descend towards Zephyria's surface. The ships hovered above cities, forests, and oceans, their shadows stretching like enormous clouds over the land. The citizens could see strange figures moving inside some of the vessels, tall and imposing shapes that radiated strength. Their movements were deliberate, slow, and precise, suggesting intelligence and power far beyond what the Luminars could understand. Families watched silently, hearts pounding, as these unknown beings prepared to interact with their world. By the time night fully fell, the first ships touched down near the outskirts of the largest city. The ground trembled slightly under their weight, and a faint glow illuminated the surrounding area. The Luminars could only observe from a safe distance, their curiosity and fear locked in a fragile balance. They waited for the next moment, for the first sign of communication, for the first act that would reveal whether the visitors were friend or foe. For the Luminars, this was the moment that had changed everything. Their plea had reached someone in the galaxy, and now the unknown had arrived. They did not know the names, the intentions, or the abilities of these beings. They only knew that their world was about to meet forces unlike anything they had imagined. And while fear gripped many hearts, a quiet determination spread as well. The determination to survive, to understand, and to face whatever came next, together. The planet held its breath. The stars above shone quietly, as if watching the unfolding story. Zephyria's citizens knew that nothing would ever be the same again, and in that moment, they realized that the galaxy was far larger, stranger, and more unpredictable than they had ever dreamed. The first rays of Zephyria's morning light barely touched the horizon when the fleet fully revealed itself. The ships, enormous and jagged, shimmered like metallic crystals in the soft glow. They hovered silently above the cities, forests, and rivers, their massive forms casting long shadows across the land. The citizens of Zephyria had never seen anything like this. Even in their wildest dreams, no Luminar had imagined beings so immense, so strange, and so powerful. The Council of Elders convened immediately. They had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, yet nothing could fully prepare them for the reality of the fleet. The ships seemed almost alive, moving with intention, scanning the planet below. Inside the observation towers, scientists and scholars monitored every detail, trying to interpret the patterns of movement, the strange energy pulses, and the flickering lights across the vessel's surfaces. The data they gathered was both terrifying and fascinating. These were not ordinary travelers. The fleet's technology was beyond anything the Luminars had ever encountered, and its presence radiated strength, precision, and intelligence. Rumors spread quickly through the cities. Children clutched their parents' hands, their wide eyes reflecting both awe and fear. Citizens whispered to one another, speculating on the purpose of the visitors. Some hoped the newcomers were saviors, the ones who had received their plea for help. Others worried that the fleet might bring danger, or worse, destruction. Across Zephyria, hearts beat faster, anticipation and anxiety filling every corner of the cities. No one knew who these beings were, and that uncertainty made every second feel heavier. Then, as the morning progressed, the first ships began to descend. The Luminars watched, holding their collective breath. The landing was not violent, but it was awe-inspiring. The ground trembled gently as the massive vessels settled on plains near the outskirts of the cities. Dust swirled around there, bases shimmering in the sunlight. From inside the ships, figures began to emerge. They were taller than any Luminar, with bodies armored in metallic exoskeletons that reflected light in sharp patterns. Their faces were hidden, but their movements were deliberate, controlled, and unmistakably intelligent. The citizens were frozen with a mixture of fear and fascination. Some stepped back, seeking safety behind buildings or terraces, while others remained in place, unable to look away. The council instructed everyone to remain calm, to avoid sudden movements, and to observe. They knew that first impressions mattered, and that any sign of hostility from either side could have catastrophic consequences. Communication had to be careful and precise, even though the Luminars did not yet know how to speak with these visitors. The first contact was subtle. The figures moved across the landing zone, scanning the ground, the rivers, and the forests. Their gestures were slow and deliberate. It was not immediately clear whether they were here to help or simply observe. The Luminars studied every motion, trying to understand intentions through patterns, gestures, and energy signals. Despite the fear, some could not help but notice the intelligence in the visitors' movements, the careful way they navigated Zephyria's terrain. A team of Luminar scientists approached cautiously, guided by the council. They brought data devices, samples of plants, water, and air, hoping to demonstrate their peaceful intentions and the nature of their plight. The taller figures accepted the samples, examining them closely with devices that glowed softly. A low hum filled the air, resonating through the land. It was a sound unfamiliar yet strangely captivating, almost as if the visitors were communicating in a language of vibration and energy rather than words. The Luminars realized quickly that traditional language would not work. The visitors responded to patterns, signals, and actions rather than spoken words. Through trial and observation, the scientists began to mimic the gestures and signals, and slowly a form of communication emerged. It was primitive, yes, but enough to convey that the visitors understood the problem. For the first time, a sense of cautious optimism spread among the citizens. Perhaps these beings, so imposing and strange, were here to help. Days passed, and the Luminars learned more about their visitors. They were known as Deathworlders, a name whispered across certain corners of the galaxy as a symbol of power and fear. Stories told of their unmatched strength, intelligence, and resilience. Though feared by many civilizations, they were not necessarily cruel. Their reputation came from the fact that they were unstoppable when faced with challenges, and their methods were often far beyond what others could understand. For the Luminars, this revelation was both terrifying and hopeful. The very beings that inspired fear might hold the key to saving their civilization. Collaboration began slowly. The Luminar scientists and the Deathworlders worked together to examine the illness. The visitors' technology was astonishing, able to analyze biological structures at levels the Luminars could not imagine. The healers provided information about the disease's symptoms and patterns, while the visitors applied advanced techniques to study its origins and spread. Communication was painstaking, requiring patience and repeated demonstration, but progress was undeniable. Slowly, a partnership formed, not of trust, but of necessity. Both species realized they needed each other to achieve a solution. The citizens observed this collaboration with a mixture of awe and relief. They saw their healers working alongside beings who had once seemed terrifying, and a strange sense of possibility began to take root. Streets that had been quiet with fear started to hum with activity again. Families helped each other, carrying supplies to the healing centers, while children watched, learning about resilience, cooperation, and hope. The planet felt alive with cautious optimism, even as the shadow of the illness still loomed. Despite the progress, fear was never far away. The Deathworlders' presence reminded everyone of the unknown. Their power was visible in every movement, every gesture, every hum of their technology. The Luminars could not forget that these visitors could leave or act in ways beyond their understanding. But even so, the citizens clung to hope. They knew that their civilization's survival depended on this fragile collaboration, and they were willing to endure uncertainty for the chance of a cure. For Elder Liara, each day was a mixture of fear, fascination, and cautious pride. She watched as her people adapted, as scientists learned new techniques, and as citizens found new courage. She realized that Zephyria's story was changing, that their civilization had entered a new chapter. The Deathworlders, once imagined as creatures of legend and fear, were now part of their reality, and with them came the promise of knowledge, power, and salvation that had never been seen before on the planet. By the end of the week, the first signs of progress began to appear. The visitors' study of the illness revealed patterns, weaknesses, and possibilities the Luminars had never noticed. Collaboration continued, and although challenges remained, hope started to grow. Citizens spoke in whispers of the day the Deathworlders arrived, marking it as a turning point in Zephyria's history. Life, though still tense and cautious, began to flow again, showing that even the most terrifying forces in the galaxy could bring unexpected aid and change the course of a civilization forever. The days on Zephyria had taken on a new rhythm. The citizens were still cautious, but life was beginning to regain its pace. The arrival of the Deathworlders had changed everything, and now the planet was alive with activity and purpose. In the cities, healers and scientists worked side by side with the visitors, translating gestures and patterns into a shared understanding of the illness. It was slow work, requiring patience and careful attention, but progress was undeniable. The Deathworlders. Technology was unlike anything the Luminars had ever seen. They could analyze a single cell and understand how the disease spread through the body. They could scan entire forests to find plants with potential healing properties. Every day brought new discoveries. The Luminars learned quickly, mimicking the visitors' techniques and combining them with their own knowledge of the planet. Together, they began developing treatments, first small remedies, then more complex solutions. It was a difficult process, and there were setbacks, but each small victory gave the citizens hope. The collaboration was not without tension. The Deathworlders were strict and methodical, and their approach often clashed with the Luminars. Gentler, more cautious methods. Sometimes arguments arose in the labs or in the observation towers. Yet both sides recognized that their shared goal outweighed any disagreement. Slowly, they began to respect each other's knowledge and abilities. The Luminars admired the visitors' strength and precision, while the Deathworlders recognized the ingenuity and creativity of the Luminar people. Over time, a mutual understanding began to form, a sense that they could achieve something extraordinary, together. The citizens of Zephyria watched these efforts closely. They had feared the visitors at first, but now they saw them working tirelessly to save their planet. Some children followed the healers and scientists, curious and eager to learn. Families gathered near the labs and observation points, offering support and supplies. Even the city markets became busier, as people prepared food and materials for those working long hours. The presence of the Deathworlders had changed not only the science of healing, but also the way the citizens lived and thought about their planet. One of the most important moments came when the first signs of improvement appeared among the sick. A few individuals who had been gravely ill began to regain strength. Their eyes brightened, their movements became steadier, and their voices returned. It was a small miracle, but it sent waves of relief and joy through the cities. Families celebrated, quietly, grateful for the hope that had arrived with the visitors. The healers felt renewed energy, inspired to work harder, and the scientists marveled at the knowledge they were gaining, learning secrets of biology and medicine that they had never imagined possible. Despite the progress, fear was never far away. The Deathworlders' power and presence reminded everyone of the unknown. They were strong, capable, and unpredictable. The citizens knew that these beings could leave or act in ways they could not understand. Still, the people clung to hope. They realized that the future of their civilization depended on this fragile collaboration, and they were willing to endure the uncertainty for the chance of survival. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the Luminars and the Deathworlders grew stronger. Communication improved. The gestures and energy signals that had once been confusing became a language of cooperation. Together, they tested new treatments, studied the illness in detail, and developed a strategy to protect the planet. Citizens began to feel a sense of security for the first time in months. They worked side by side, sharing knowledge, helping each other, and taking part in the great effort to save Zephyria. Elder Liara often walked among the people, observing their determination and courage. She realized that her planet was entering a new era, a time when fear and hope coexisted, when knowledge and strength combined to face a threat bigger than any one species. The citizens of Zephyria were learning to adapt, to cooperate, and to find courage in the face of uncertainty. And while the Deathworlders remained imposing and strange, they had become a part of Zephyria's story, guiding the Luminars toward survival and a deeper understanding of the universe. As the first signs of a cure began to appear, hope became more tangible. People could imagine a life beyond fear, beyond sickness. Streets filled with laughter again, and the sounds of music and learning returned to the cities. The planet was slowly healing, and so were the hearts of its citizens. The presence of the Deathworlders had taught the Luminars a valuable lesson, that even in the face of the most frightening unknown, courage, cooperation, and patience could bring life-saving results. Finally, after weeks of tireless work, a breakthrough arrived. The combined efforts of the Luminars and the Deathworlders had created a treatment capable of controlling the illness. It was not an instant cure, but it was enough to save lives and restore hope to the planet. The citizens watched as the first groups of sick began to recover fully, regaining strength, color, and energy. Families reunited, laughter returned to the streets, and Zephyria's cities glowed with life once more. The citizens celebrated carefully, aware that the illness was not yet entirely gone. But for the first time in months, they allowed themselves to imagine a future without fear. The healers continued their work, administering treatments and monitoring patients, while the scientists documented every step, learning from the visitors and recording knowledge for generations to come. The collaboration had not only saved lives, but had expanded the understanding of medicine, biology, and the interconnectedness of life on Zephyria. The Deathworlders prepared to leave. Their mission had been successful, and their presence, once terrifying, had brought salvation. The citizens gathered to watch them depart. There was no fear in the air now, only gratitude and quiet awe. The visitors moved with the same deliberate grace as when they arrived. But now there was a sense of accomplishment, a silent acknowledgement of the bond formed between two very different species. The Luminars understood that while the Deathworlders were powerful and enigmatic, they had chosen to help, and that choice had changed the course of Zephyria's history. Elder Lyara addressed the citizens for the first time in weeks. She spoke of courage, patience, and hope. She reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, their actions, their cooperation, and their perseverance had brought life back to their planet. She spoke of the lessons learned from the Deathworlders, the importance of knowledge, adaptability, and strength in the face of the unknown. The citizens listened, hearts full of pride and gratitude, realizing that they had survived because of unity and determination. As the fleet departed, leaving trails of light in the sky, the Luminars looked up and felt a sense of wonder. The galaxy had revealed itself in a new way, full of unknown forces, strange beings, and unexpected help. They knew that the universe was vast and unpredictable, but they also knew that courage, hope, and cooperation could bring even the most unlikely allies together. Zephyria would remember this day for generations, the day when the Deathworlders arrived, when fear met hope, and when their civilization survived against great odds. In the weeks that followed, life on Zephyria slowly returned to normal. The illness was fully contained, the cities were alive with music and laughter again, and the forests and rivers seemed to shine brighter. Children played in the streets without fear, citizens worked in their communities with renewed energy, and the healers and scientists continued to explore new knowledge. The planet had changed, but it was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The story of the Deathworlders became legend, told from parent to child, from teacher to student. It was a story of fear, courage, hope, and collaboration. It was a reminder that help could come from the most unexpected places and that even the most terrifying forces could bring salvation. Zephyria had survived, and its citizens had learned that the universe, vast and mysterious, was full of surprises, some frightening, some wonderful, but all part of the grand adventure of life. And so, the planet continued to shine under its twin moons, its forests, rivers, and cities alive with the energy of its people. The Luminars moved forward stronger and wiser, their hearts filled with hope for whatever the galaxy might bring next. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew that together, with courage, knowledge, and unity, they could face whatever lay ahead. The legacy of that remarkable time, the arrival of the Deathworlders, would remain a guiding story for generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could light the way.